Is this the world's most haunted house? Imagine taking a deep breath, but instead of oxygen, it feels as if you are inhaling pure sorrow. You are standing at the end of a 500-foot-long concrete tunnel known as the Death Chute. Here, in total darkness, tens of thousands of bodies were rolled out in silence so that the living patients wouldn't see how swiftly death harvested its victims. But what truly curdles the blood isn't the story of those who died, but the reports of those who never left. From the little boy who asks you to play in the empty corridors to the grotesque creature known as the Creeper, a shadow that doesn't walk upright but crawls along the walls and ceilings in search of its next visitor. Today on Bedtime Chillers, we step behind the shattered windows of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. We will investigate the room where two women took their own lives, listen to the testimonies of those bitten by invisible mouths, and find out why this building is considered the most haunted place on Earth. Follow us, if you dare. The story of Waverly Hills begins with desperation. In the early 20th century, tuberculosis, or the White Plague, was a death sentence. There were no antibiotics. Doctors believed the only cure was extreme amounts of fresh air, rest, and sunlight. When the original wooden hospital became overcrowded, the massive structure we see today was built, completed in 1926. But behind the facade of fresh air hid a dark reality. The treatments tested were often brutal. Ribs were cut away to collapse lungs, or heavy sandbags were placed on patients' chests. The death toll was so high that they eventually couldn't roll the corpses through the main entrance without demoralizing the living patients. The solution was the infamous Death Chute, a 500-foot concrete tunnel where bodies were sent down in secret to be picked up by waiting train cars at the bottom of the hill. It is here, in these dark spaces, that the true hauntings begin. Waverly Hills is considered one of the most active places in the world for paranormal activity, and it's not just a title, it's a physical experience for those who enter. Visitors often speak of an immediate and overwhelming sensation of being watched from dark corners. There is even a phenomenon called the Waverly Weight, a crushing sensation across the chest that makes it difficult to breathe, almost as if the lungs are being restricted by an invisible force. A chilling reminder of how tuberculosis once suffocated the patients within. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the world truly took notice of the isolated hill in Kentucky. When groundbreaking programs like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures entered the dark corridors with thermal cameras and sensitive microphones, they captured evidence that shocked even the most skeptical investigators. In one of the most famous TV moments ever, a team managed to document what looked like a full-bodied shadow figure moving across a corridor in real time. These broadcasts instantly transformed Waverly Hills from a forgotten ruin into a global site of pilgrimage for anyone seeking the truth about what lies beyond death. Even today, in 2026, new generations of investigators continue to journey here in hopes of capturing that same kind of impossible evidence on film. One of the most heartbreaking and well-documented testimonies concerns a little boy called Timmy. He is said to have been a 6-year-old patient whose parents were also hospitalized with tuberculosis, leaving him alone. According to some tragic legends, he fell from the roof to his death, but his spirit seems to have stayed behind to play. Hundreds of investigators over the years have sought contact with him, often using simple toys. There are countless clips where balls placed in empty corridors suddenly begin to roll on their own, stop, and then roll back toward the investigator, as if an invisible child is responding to the game. It's not just balls. People have heard the sound of small feet running on the upper floors and a distant, faint child's laughter echoing through the desolate halls. Some visitors have even felt small, ice-cold hands fumbling for their own as they moved through the darkness.
But Timmy isn't the only child at Waverly.
In the third-floor solarium, a little girl named Mary is often seen running back and forth, as if she is still trying to catch the sunlight that doctors hoped would cure her. This playful energy stands in sharp contrast to the more aggressive forces on the fourth floor, where visitors have testified to being pushed, having their hair pulled, or even being bitten by invisible entities. It is a place where the suffering of history isn't just written on the walls, but actively interacts with the living.
Not all entities lingering at Waverly Hills
Are as innocent or playful as Timmy. When you step onto the fourth floor, the atmosphere changes drastically. The air grows colder, denser, and a sense of genuine malice begins to crawl up your spine. It is here, in the interminable corridors, that reports of shadow people are most frequent. These aren't ordinary shadows caused by tricks of the light, but figures of compact darkness that seem to absorb all light around them. They are often described as peepers, who poke their heads out from empty patient rooms to observe visitors, only to quickly retreat when a flashlight is aimed at them. However, the most terrifying testimony from the entire sanatorium concerns the creature that investigators and visitors have dubbed the Creeper. Unlike the upright shadow figures, this entity moves in a way that defies human anatomy. Witnesses describe it as a dark form moving on all fours, like a giant spider or a human with broken, backward-turned limbs. It is often seen crawling at an unnatural speed along the walls or even the ceiling, accompanied by a sound like and a low, animalistic growl. One investigator recounted seeing the creeper manifest at the end of a hallway. It fixed its glowing red eyes on him and then rushed forward at a jerky, frenzied pace, only to dissolve into nothingness just before reaching his feet. The experience leaves behind a feeling of total, paralyzing dread that lingers long after leaving the floor. Moving up to the fifth floor, you reach the most infamous spot in the building, room 502. This room carries a weight that feels purely physical. It was here, in 1928, that a 29-year-old nurse was found hanging from a light fixture. According to documentation and local legends, she was unmarried and pregnant. A terrible scandal in the strict society of that time, believed to have driven her to desperation. But the tragedy of room 502 didn't end there. Just 4 years later, in 1932, another nurse reportedly jumped from the roof just outside the same room. People have speculated whether she jumped of her own accord or was pushed by an invisible force lingering from the first death. Today, room 502 is the center of an extremely hostile energy. Visitors who cross the threshold often report sudden panic attacks, a feeling of being strangled, or an explainable, icy chill. There are several documented cases of people fainting without warning inside the room. Most frightening are the electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, captured here. Investigators have recorded a stern, authoritative female voice brusquely whispering, "Get out," or "Leave," directly into the microphone. Some believe the room acts as a portal or a vortex of negative energy that feeds on its tragic history and refuses to let the dead rest in peace.
The Death Chute.
A tunnel for the nameless. Deep beneath the building's foundation lies perhaps Waverly Hills' most notorious part, the 500-foot concrete tunnel, popularly known as the Body Chute. It slopes at a steep 45-degree angle toward the bottom of the hill, and was originally built to transport food and supplies via a motorized cable system. But during the darkest years of the tuberculosis epidemic, when death claimed victims by the hour, the tunnel took on a new, macabre purpose. Doctors feared that the sight of constant hearse transports would crush the remaining patients' hope and will to live. Therefore, the dead were sent down through this underground passage under the cover of darkness to be picked up by waiting train cars at the foot of the hill. It is in this cold, damp environment that some of the most physical encounters with the unknown take place. One poignant testimony comes from a man attending a private overnight investigation. He was halfway down the tunnel when the heavy silence was suddenly torn apart by the sound of metal against concrete, a sound as if the old wheels of the transport cart had begun to roll once again. Shortly after, he heard a desperate, gasping sound, as if someone right behind him was struggling for air in ruined lungs. When he panicked and swept his flashlight over the raw walls, the passage was empty, but the chill that swept in was so unnatural that his own breath immediately formed thick frost in the air. Before he could flee, he felt an ice-cold, weightless hand placed over his mouth, a pressure that felt like a silent order not to scream, before he rushed up the stairs in blind terror. The vanished sense of the past. It isn't only sight and hearing that are attacked at Waverly Hills. Many testify to how the sense of smell becomes a portal to the past. In what was once the sanatorium's main kitchen, today a ruin of shattered glass, peeling paint, and rotting wood, something inexplicable happens. Amidst the musty stench of mold and decay, the scent of fresh-baked bread or frying food suddenly hits visitors. This scent is often associated with a figure in a white coat, believed by many to be one of the cooks who worked around the clock to feed the hospital's thousands of residents. But the scents can also be significantly darker. In certain corridors, a sharp, stinging smell of old hospital disinfectant and ether can appear out of nowhere, as if a medical cart had just been rolled past. In other places, investigators have reported a heavy scent of pipe tobacco or expensive cigars, despite smoking being banned in the building for over half a century. Most terrifying, however, is the sweet, sickly stench of rot that can suddenly fill a room. It is a smell that cannot be washed from memory, and it often appears in connection with sightings of the dark shadow creatures, as if they carry with them the scent of the grave they refuse to rest in. Today, Waverly Hills lives on, no longer as a hospital for the dying, but as a massive historical monument and a beacon for the unexplained. The gates are now open to the public, but stepping behind those brick walls is described by many as stepping entirely out of time. The current owners have dedicated decades to saving this Gothic ruin from total collapse. It is a Herculean battle against time, weathered wood, and the forces of nature, but there is a constant, almost electric tension between the physical restoration and the spiritual presence. Workers often tell of leaving their tools in a locked room, only to find them scattered in a circle in another part of the building the next morning. It seems the more one touches the walls and tries to renew the place, the more life is awakened in the souls who refuse to be renovated away. For those seeking proof of an afterlife, the options for visiting are broad. One can book guided historical tours during the day, where the long corridors are bathed in a deceptively calm sunlight and one learns about architecture and medicine. But it is at night that Waverly Hills shows its true face. The most sought-after arrangements are the 8-hour paranormal investigations, so-called lockdowns. There, you and a small group are locked inside the massive building from dusk till dawn. You are left alone with the darkness, the heavy silence, and the thousands of souls who never checked out. Those who have completed these nightly vigils often tell the same story. There is a before and an after Waverly Hills. A famous paranormal investigator described it as the building not just observing you, but actually leaking into your psyche. You never walk out of there as exactly the same person you were when you walked in. It isn't just about the visual shadows or the sounds of heavy footsteps in the room above. It is a fundamental shift in one's understanding of reality. A testimonial from a visitor who attended as recently as last year describes an experience of the Waverly weight, a sudden, intense sorrow that felt like a physical weight on her shoulders. She recounted hearing a muffled cough right by her ear and smelling old smoke, even though she was completely alone in the room. This feeling of sadness lingered for weeks after the visit, as if an invisible shadow had latched onto her and followed her home. This raises the great existential question that gnaws at every human who wanders through these corridors. What is it we are actually experiencing? Is all this just so-called residual energy, an emotional recording in stone and concrete, created by the unfathomable anxiety and trauma that tens of thousands of people endured here? Is it an eternal loop of hospital routines, the sound of wheelchairs and hushed conversations being played over and over because the imprint was too deep to fade with time? Or is it intelligent activity? Are they actually still in there, aware of our presence? Perhaps we are seeing nurses still trying to complete their rounds with a sense of duty that extends beyond the grave, and patients clutching their beds in hope of that cure that never arrived in time. Perhaps they are trapped in a timeless waiting room between two worlds. Perhaps they are the last witnesses to an era of suffering that the modern world would rather forget. But one thing is certain, and it is something you feel in every fiber of your body when the sun sets behind the Kentucky woods and darkness swallows the building. When the shadows begin to move in the shattered window frames of Waverly Hills, you are never, ever truly alone. Something sees you. Something is waiting for you around the next dark corner. And something wants you to know that they are still waiting to be heard. Today, in 2026, the building faces new challenges. Restoration work has come a long way, and parts of the hospital previously cordoned off due to risk of collapse have now been secured. But ironically, guides report that activity has only increased in the newly opened rooms, as if the spirits that rested beneath the debris have finally been given space to move freely again. Thank you for watching Bedtime Chillers. If you dare to visit Waverly, make sure never to walk alone in the death chute. It would also be interesting to hear if anyone here has visited this place. If so, I'd love to hear about your experience. One last request, if I may. Keep commenting on haunted locations you want me to make videos about. It's your engagement that keeps the channel alive. See you in the next video.